nice to be here. And thanks for the invitation. So my name is Christian Etter, as we heard before. I'm from Switzerland, so don't expect any jokes. I work mainly for 3 companies institutes, one of which is Unit 9, which I don't think needs any further introduction. And I think we'll also hear later on more about it. The other one is Etter Studio, which is my own company, which I founded maybe 8 years ago in Zurich. And the third one is the MUDA, which stands for Museum of Digital Art, which I co-direct. So when I got the invitation to speak here, I asked the organizer if there is any theme. But they said, no, you can do whatever you want, whatever you think is inspiring. And for me, that's always a bit difficult. I kind of like limitations because it forces you to choose a certain angle on something. And you will hear more about that later. But therefore, I just thought, well, then I take the theme of the conference, of course. So you will hear a lot about digital today, which is kind of a word I really like and often use, but what does it even mean? I mean, you hear it in so many different contexts today, like there's the digital shift, there's digital healthcare, you know, it's kind of used everywhere and therefore becomes meaningless, and there's nothing that ties it together other than the color blue, according to Google image search. So, but if you look at the definition, it's actually quite clear. Digit comes from digit, the finger, and it's based on the Latin word digitam, which means finger, and finger, of course, is a reference to numbers because you use your fingers for counting. So for me, that's kind of the base of what digital means. So there are things that run on zeros and ones, but they don't necessarily have to be kind of the latest technology. I'm actually not a huge fan of kind of just using technology for the sake of using it. So whenever there's a new hype of a new technology, I kind of, I'm a little bit critical. And I try to avoid these kind of technologies even sometimes. So in my talk, I just want to talk about kind of the kind of digital that I like and that I try to produce by talking you through 3 of my projects. I'm going to start with Breaking Bad, which is actually not a very new project. I always cringe a bit when people present old work, and so it's funny I present this project, but I think it was quite interesting in terms of my sense of digital, how it was shaped, and I think that project was actually kind of a breaking point as well in that regard. And I mean, now it's such a huge thing. Breaking Bad has won so many awards and has record viewing numbers. But like everything, it started at 0 at one point. And it was a really tricky situation. Back then I was working in London with Unit 9, and we were approached by Mono, which is a fantastic agency from the United States. And they were in this tricky situation. Their client AMC produced a pilot. For those who don't know Breaking Bad, it's about a teacher who starts to produce drugs. And the channel is actually, they regarded themselves as a family channel. So they were really in this dilemma. They put a lot of money into the pilot, and they needed a certain viewing numbers in order to bankroll the production of the series. But they didn't necessarily want people to know that they have done that. So there was this huge contradiction. And on the other hand, they also pretty much ran out of time and money. And at the point the project came to us, they were just desperate for anything, I think. And therefore, I've seen the pilot and I thought, wow, this is really good. We should really help them to make this work. But it was really difficult when you're in that situation. As I said, there was no money, no time. We couldn't fly to Albuquerque, where the series is based, to film. We didn't have access to the actors. So what do you do in that situation? Well, you start to build the stuff yourself. So, for example, this is a very iconic drug labor, which was based in a little van, which we ordered a similar toy thing on eBay and then just painted it and created these little characters which represent the actors. And also we built this huge table. This is about 4 meters in diameter. And we went at night to the neighboring construction sites and just stole sand and started to build this desert, which resembles the desert in the pilot. Here you see our very sophisticated camera work, which is basically just an elastic rope which allows us to create these really nice camera movements. And what we could do is we could turn the table ever so slightly, and then we would have a fixed camera on the side, and we would always take a still photograph on each angle. And this kind of produced this really weird but beautiful effect. So we would create these interactive landscapes where we just get objects and make them rotatable, and then the user is able to find hidden things in there. And it had this kind of weird, surreal, kind of David Lynchy quality, because maybe you noticed the shadow actually never moves. It's always the same direction because the table was turning, not the light. And I think even though you don't understand what's weird, we get a sense of there's something weird going on, which is a nice reflection of the series. So when we got that, we were really surprised, and we started to explore this technique further. So we got more objects in from that we saw just in the pilot, and we put them on a tripod and started to rotate them. And we would hide these triggering points in them where the user could click and then find kind of sequences from the pilot, which would kind of give you a sense what it is about, but without directly talking about drugs. So when we produced this maybe in a month, the whole thing, and we were super surprised when we put it out. All we added to this was kind of a ticker, so you would see when the pilot starts, and you could click on that, and 10 minutes before the pilot aired, you would get an email saying the pilot is airing now. And yeah, it was really super successful, and then they got enough viewing numbers and could produce the series, and the rest is history, as they say. But for me, what was really interesting is kind of, I learned through that project that limitations are actually really something liberating, because you have such a tight frame you have to work in. You really need to be creative and find something that works within that framework. And you really have to focus. There's no other way how to do it. And the other thing I found interesting was that there's, we use this super old stop motion technique, which has been used for decades. And by combining them, back then it was Flash with this interactive technology. We could create something new, which was really interesting. So it was really about finding the best in old and new tools and combining them. Which also leads me to the next project, which is called Plug and Play. I don't know if any of you know that. Plug and Play has also quite an interesting story behind it. Plug and Play started as a short film, and it was produced by a young Swiss filmmaker called Michael Frey. And Michael Frey actually he used to be trained as a technical machine drawer. So whenever he draws a line, it's kind of perfect, straight line. And he told me he was super annoyed about that, because when he started to work in animation, he just felt his straight lines don't represent the thing they should represent, which are, his films are kind of human emotions. So he was really puzzled by that. And the way he solved this, he started to just draw with his index finger on the trackpad of the laptop. Because as you know, it's really hard to draw on the trackpad. He started to create these weird wiggly lines, and he felt this works much better because it kind of is imperfect and feels very human. So he drew the entire short movie on his trackpad, and he also decided, because it's a lot about binary, so it's about, you know, either you love somebody or you don't love somebody, and there is nothing in between. So he took this very ironic notion and also decided that there's only black or white pixel, so there's no kind of anti-aliasing in between. And so the whole film was about that, and it was super beautiful, I thought. So eventually he wanted to turn this into a game, and he teamed up with Mario von Rickenbach, a programmer, and they came to my company and asked if I would be interested to produce it with them. And again, it was such a good kind of base material there that, of course, we started to work on this. And we worked on this for probably a year. And yeah, we didn't think so much about it, because the humor is quite weird and crude. And even though we really liked that, we didn't think other people liked that so much. But when we put it out, we didn't really do much advertising for it. But something weird happened, was that the YouTubers, pretty much all the big YouTubers you can name, started to pick this up, and it almost became kind of a cultural thing, this game. And yeah, we jokingly referred to them as our outsourced marketing department, but the viewing numbers are incredible. They're far over 100 million views on YouTube, and of course that also helps us to promote the game. So again, it was kind of funny to have something. So we have a lot of really old animation techniques, but we combine them with quite new kind of physics engines, but we really want to kind of keep the look. It wasn't so easy actually to develop this, even though it looks very simple. But it was interesting to see the reaction to that, and also what was quite strong in this work was that the content really needs to influence the shape and the form of things, and even the method, how you kind of portray the contents. So the third project I'd like to talk about is the MUDA, which stands for the Museum of Digital Art, which we opened this February. And the MUDA was kind of born out of frustration. I came back to Switzerland, and even though you would think there's a lot of resources around Switzerland, the exhibitions are quite, for my opinion, were quite boring. And I often go to exhibitions, so I was a bit annoyed about that. And yeah, after a while I thought, well, instead of complaining, maybe I have to do something about it. And we started to look just for a small space where we could just kind of show digital art, which was kind of missing back then, and just stuff that we would like to see. And then eventually we were put into the touch with the owners of this building, which is a really beautiful building in Zurich. It's the first high-rise building built in '62. And to our surprise, did the owner offer us to rent the entire ground floor of this building. And even though we never wanted this to be so big, we just thought, well, it's such a good occasion, we just have to try this. But the problem was that because we didn't think it would be so big, even though we raised some money, we didn't have really the funds to do the construction, the necessary constructions, which in Switzerland is super expensive. And that's why this happened last summer.
This is not a pipe. 1. Digital technology seeps into our society, unlike anything before. Connecting people, cutting the middlemen, decentralizing capital and knowledge. It's the zeros and ones, the underlying set of rules that makes all of this work. 2. These two humans have spent the last years laying the groundwork for something called MUDA, the Museum of Digital Art. Is it for profit? No. The MUDA will be an open platform merging science and creativity, a neutral space to reflect on technology's place in our lives. How social are algorithms? How artificial is intelligence? How secure is privacy? How legitimate piracy? How equal information? And what's the minimum wage for robots anyway? A space for discussion, to experiment and reclaim technology for playful and poetic purposes, with no financial or political intentions.
Preparing for contact. Good.
Where will this wonderful place be? Right here, in your screen. And also here, in the center of Europe, in one of Switzerland's oldest high-rise buildings. 3. These two again. They have spent the last years gathering all the permissions and secured the budget to run the museum. The final missing piece now is you. Become a founding member of the Museum of Digital Art, and complete the funding to cover the necessary construction works, to transform the ground floor into a public space complying with all regulations. Your support will kickstart a virtual and physical institute, hosting, documenting and sharing digital arts.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. So we published this in last summer, and it's really weird when you're at that point, because then you understand why there's never really any insurance you have to give in these crowdsourcing projects, because you really have to stand there and put your name on it. So we were super nervous, and also we needed $100,000, which kind of in cultural funding, at least for Switzerland, has never happened before. But it was just the kind of money we needed, and we had 30 days of time and could find over 500 backers from around the world and secured even over $111,000. So just 2 weeks after, we could start the construction for Europe's first Museum of Digital Art, and which we opened this February. So what do we do there? So there are kind of three parts to it. The first part are the exhibitions. That's kind of the obvious part. And as I said before, kind of my understanding of digital is just things that run on zeros and one. So we invite basically programmers to do exhibitions. But of course, because we are a physical space, we want them to give the visitors a physical reason to come. We don't just want to have screens everywhere, because you could experience that at home as well. So we want physical objects, and we want them to be programmed. But of course, we also know not everybody can come to Zurich. So therefore we also produce for each exhibition a virtual exhibition which lives in the form of an app which you can download. And just to give you an understanding, I'll show you the trailer of the latest app that we just produced. So that app was for an exhibition by Andreas Isin and Sidi Vanetti. They're two artists from Switzerland, and their speciality is really to take kind of industrial objects and don't change anything physically, but just reprogram them to they're kind of engineering geeks, and they really admire the engineering, and they want you to open your eyes to the beauty of these objects. So I'll show you quickly two of their installations. The first one is called Digit, which is not so surprising.
Digits is composed of 42 electromechanical elements.
So basically what they have done is they have taken 42 of these elements that you see at gas stations.
They are usually used to post the price of fuel at gas stations.
Exactly. So they just reprogram them and kind of create these beautiful patterns.
In the installation, the individual
Another example is this other piece, which is called Zurich HB Flap. And basically for the last 30 years, this board was at the main station in Zurich, just showing the train times. And eventually it had to be replaced, and after long negotiations, we could manage to convince the owners to give it to us. And all they did is reprogram this, put new algorithms in it to create these beautiful choreographies and make the whole thing dance. And just to give you a kind of a sense of the scale, this whole thing is over 13 meters long and 3 meters high, and it used to weigh more than 7 tons. So when you stand in front of it, it's a really powerful experience. This is another installation from the current exhibition. So it's a very simple installation. All it is a wooden board and 2 ropes attached to the ceiling, and there is a Kinect at the top of it, which looks at the angle of the rope and therefore calculates more or less the position of the eyes of the person sitting on it. And then we actually worked with the Worldwide Telescope, which is this amazing open source application from Microsoft, which kind of has the entire observable universe in it, but everything is scientifically accurate, like the moon. You see that every crater actually is where it should be. And when putting this together, this is an installation by a French art collective called Lab 212. It kind of creates this illusion that you actually swing over the moon and swing through the galaxies. And it's very simple, but very poetic and powerful, and for me, a really good kind of use of technology, or again, to kind of combine physical aspects and digital aspects to create something new. The second part of the Muda is about education, because like many countries in Europe, Switzerland has no natural resources, maybe water, but nothing else. So for us it's kind of clear that if we want to have a future, we need to build people, we need to empower people to look into programming. And the way we do that is we have these workshops for children. They start kind of at 4 years old. And we just show them how computers think. Often we don't even use computers to show it to them, but we really want to empower them and show them that you can open computers and just take stuff out, put new stuff in there, and really use it as a creative tool that is not really there just for Excel, business, or scientific things, but also just to play. So this is really has become an important part of the Muda, and we're super happy that this is growing nicely. And the third part is something which also kind of has become quite important to us. It's a kind of a platform where we look at the connection of data, algorithms, and society. When, for example, looking at the Muda, we are such a small team who run it, and the only way to do that is really to automate everything that we can. So, for example, we have a cleaning robot. The whole print stuff is done by algorithm. Our website is designed by an algorithm, so we just can throw all the contents in there, and it's being designed according to the rules that we give the algorithm, so we don't need to care about that. And even the curation is now done by an algorithm. The way that works is that we defined the first 4 exhibitions, and now we have a bot that goes through the internet and looks for the data patterns of these previous artists, and then just looks for similar patterns, and eventually writes us an email saying this is the new exhibition. And when you think of that, of course, that wouldn't have been possible before. So what we're actually doing is we replace humans with machines. And that's, yeah, it's not really new. I mean, even when you look, or when I think back of the production of Breaking Bad, we had this analog camera, then we needed to send the tape to a company that would digitize the contents and send us back a DVD. All that is not needed anymore, so consequently you don't need the people in between anymore. And that has been going on for a long time. So each of us working has probably replaced 5 other people, but of course also has created new things. And again, you can kind of go back a lot with that. I mean, if you look at the Industrial Revolution, it was the same topic. You know, the first textile factories, when they opened, people were really mad because they thought the machines are taking away their jobs, and some got burned down because of that. But somehow the job disappeared. It has never happened because, of course, things get cheaper because of automatization. People can afford more. There are new jobs that this thing creates. So despite all problems that we're facing at the moment with climate change and wars and so on, it's a super exciting time. We can do stuff we could never do before, and we have access to information like never before. But what is maybe different is now is just the way machines work. It's exponential. So it's a concept which I think is really hard to understand for us humans. But basically every year computers get so much faster, and this is kind of a curve that goes exponentially. So it's really hard to understand where this even is going. And of course the question is that good or bad? Well, it's probably not good or not bad. Of course, algorithms and computers are a tool, like a car. You can use a car to kill somebody or to bring somebody to the hospital. It really depends on the person using that tool, what to do with it. But of course it creates some really important questions for our future, like where do we go from here? Of course, we'll probably have self-driving cars which need to communicate with each other. So who is defining these rules? Are algorithms becoming politics? And there are many questions that implies, or do we need a minimum wage for robots since it replaces people, and maybe we could use that money to pay the people who don't need to work anymore because their work is still being done just by robots? Or do we need to tax international tech companies better since they profit a lot from this automatization to kind of give space to the people who don't need to work anymore? So these are really questions that we want to discuss as well at the MUDA and give it just a neutral platform to do that. So I hope I could give you a quick overview of the kind of thinking behind this project and the thinking behind my understanding of digital. This is my Twitter handle, and thank you so much for your attention and enjoy the conference.
Thank you, thank you. A couple of questions, if that's all right?
Sure.
Fantastic. One in particular from Nick Herter on Twitter. He asks, how's MUDA been performing as an attraction? And is it self-financed, or do you have to seek third-party funds?
Yeah, so performing, I mean, it's not such a huge space. It's one floor of this building, and I think, we see a steady increase of visitor numbers, which makes us super happy. But it's always a struggle. Like, funding is kind of the key thing. Like, we don't get any subsidies from governments, so we have to find all the money ourselves. But we have really a lot of good and important people believing in us. So we partner up with a local web agency called Hinderling Volkart, which support us a lot. We just announced our partnership with Microsoft.
Yeah, so you've got sponsors and partnerships.
Yeah, so they help us with their engineers, but also with resources and infrastructure. And these things help a lot. But it's kind of, whenever you start something new, you don't know if things work out.
No, you have to take a risk, yeah.
Absolutely.
And then the second question is, Mario and Michael, how did they approach you? Was it an email with a proof of concept? What was it that really kind of grabbed you and said, okay guys, let's take this forward? Because I guess you get lots of emails like that.
Yeah, well, they had it
super
easy because Mario, I used to work a lot with Mario, so he's a good friend of mine, and therefore it's very easy to talk about these things. And then, of course, if the content is good, then it's just, you don't need to pitch anything. I think whenever you have good contents, it's just enough to let the content speak.
So that's the kind of thing that make you take notice of the content itself.
Of course.
If you had some kind of proof of concept to show you or something, rather than just a page of A4 written.
Also, like when we hire, we never look at CVs. We just look at the work that the person has done.
That's a great insight.
Because that just speaks much more about that person.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christian Etter, everyone.